Do you both consent to being recorded?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
That's on film. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 27 of the THPStrength podcast. Today we have my coach, Matt McInnes-Watson. He's going to be asking Isaiah a few questions about dunking from the perspective of someone that studies plyometrics, from the perspective of a high jump coach, from the perspective of an equally nerdy jump coach like myself. So you guys will get a little bit of insight, maybe to some complex stuff that coaches like us are thinking about that maybe is a little bit different than what you would hear from a basketball coach or even myself, obviously. So, as you guys know, Matt's been coaching me. We've talked about this before if you've been listening to the podcast, and it's been going well. I feel like I'm probably going to hit 55 inches in my vertical when I test on next week. I don't know what the plan is, actually. We'll see when I do test. But no, I actually don't know what to expect. I think based on what I've been doing, technically I feel really good. So I'm excited to see how I progress. I'm having some Achilles issues, but fortunately I am a tendon guru and I will fix it. And I call myself a guru because I know a lot of coaches out there really appreciate when you self-proclaim self-gurus or gurus. So I'm going to just label myself that. Matt's like, yeah, no. Anyways, I did want to start the podcast off by saying this to both of you guys. I saw a video yesterday. It was on TikTok. I don't know if you know what TikTok is, Matt, but great content on TikTok. Tell you what. Anyways, saw this video and a guy was talking about how we have taste buds on our scrotum, on our nuts. And so I've gone through the process. I don't know how he was really funny. He was talking about how the U.S. education system completely failed to mention this through his entire development through high school and college. No one ever told him that. And so he was saying it's possible to taste two flavors, umami and I believe citrus or something of sorts. And so the video is him proceeding to ball dip in some soy sauce. It's the funniest shit ever. It doesn't show it. I don't know if he actually does, but he fact checked it before he did it, and he's like, now in the Quran and the Bible it says nothing about premarital ball dipping, so I'm gonna do it. It was the funniest shit ever. So if you're listening to this, we know we have a bunch of angsty 18 to 24-year-olds listening to this. I hope you guys take the time to look that up. Do a quick Google search. Do you have taste buds on your ball sack? Let me know what you find. If any of you proceed to do the research study of actually ball dipping, also let me know what you find. I can't imagine what that would be like. I was over here thinking about it.
I don't know what to think right now.
It's real, bro. I think it's real. My brother and I, we had a whole debate in a group chat whether or not it was a real thing. So I think I'm just going to have to debunk this myth and go ahead and do a controlled study. I'll put it in everyone's training. All right. Let me know what you taste, 1 to 10. Is it umami or is it citrus? Anyways, now that we're done with that little piece of information for you guys, again, if you're training with us, you'll see it in your training in the upcoming week or two. You can go ahead. I guess tell us. I mean, I've kind of introed you a little bit, but maybe discuss a little bit. I don't know if we talk about the research that you've been doing and what the role is with that so that people kind of understand your credentials, because I don't think they fully understand.
Okay. So, I mean, just a little bit of a background to me. I've got a really basic bachelor's degree in sports. It was sports studies. It was one of those moments where I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I was like, sports studies, that encapsulate everything sports-wise. So I did sports studies. And then as I kind of got way more into high jumping and learning about the sports science world, I kind of thought I need to do something more science-based. So I did a master's in basically sport and exercise science, had a fancy term called athletic development and peak performance. Take of that what you will. But it encapsulated loads of S&C, it had loads of psych in it, it had kind of every little snippet for you as a coach to be able to take forward into your practice, which I really enjoyed about it. And then from that, I had a major project or thesis at the end of my master's that was kind of heavily led on to why I started my PhD. And now I'm doing a PhD in, I guess I could call it plyometrics. But I'm looking to classify and give a terminology to plyometrics and figure out a way if we can quantify plyometrics scientifically, because we can measure a lot of things with plyometrics and high speed movement, but I don't think anyone's kind of hit the nail on the head with it perfectly so far. So in terms of what I'm doing at the moment, my first study is actually looking at the terminology and language of plyometrics, because for me, I've gone through a hell of a lot, and I've read a lot of stories from other people that have talked about, if I call a leap 2 foot movement to a 2 foot movement, another person might call it a hop. And it's absolutely tearing up research because of it. I've got papers sat by each other from the same author that talks about the same movement that's named 2 different things. So for me, I want to set a language before I can then set a structure. So I'm doing that at the moment, and really kind of putting myself out there to say, actually, I'm going to restructure plyometrics a bit more away from the typical progressional method of jumping off higher boxes, jumping onto higher boxes, whatever you might call plyometric, which again, the term is being bastardized as we speak, in terms of what's actually a real plyometric, and what's kind of come from our forefathers in Yuri Verkhoshansky and Mel Sif. So that for me is going to be a kind of starting point for me then to push forward in looking at how we can kind of quantify plyometrics. And I'm already it's changing every day in terms of what I'm actually putting together as my final thesis. But I've got 3 more studies to write in the PhD, so it's going to be interesting in terms of how it develops. So from there, I'm kind of putting it into my normal coaching practices. I write some professional blogs as well, which people can get into, and my system of plyometrics and how I put it together as a coach, and how it can then be used in research, how it can be used in the professional coaching world. There's a little bit of a background to my kind of plyometric story, and where it's going to hopefully go over the next 3 or 4 years. By the end of it, it might not even be called plyometrics. Who knows?
So you're really just you're gonna be the only person you're actually gonna be like Dr. Jump or Dr. Plyometric or whatever you want to call it. You're gonna be the only person with a PhD in said topic. I feel like no one has a PhD in plyometrics. That's the only reason I like you. No, I'm kidding. No, I did actually think about this when you were talking about I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, but I guess the terms that you use to describe each of those movements, and or the language that you use. Are you familiar in quantifying plyometrics? Firstly, my old mentor Mike Young talked about it, and his was really interesting. The lecture he did, most of his was based off the height that you drop and the contact time, and double leg or single leg, which kind of from a biomechanics view simplifies everything and makes sense. And then so that's one area where I've kind of heard that as well, and he's talked about that. And then the other side of things was a research study actually done at Northern Michigan, or NMU. I don't know if you've read this study with Eben, Randy Jensen. Are you familiar with that? Okay, those are Randy Jensen was my my master's degree advisor. They did that study I think a couple of years before I got there. Eric Patushik is on the paper too. But they went through and tried to define all the forces and which ones were more intense objectively from a knee joint torque angle or something.
The torque angles, I think the 3 different joints, they looked at hip, knee, and ankle torque alongside things like ground reaction force, ground contact time, things like that.
Yeah, it's crazy that my graduate school did that research and I didn't even care about it at the time. I was because it was I don't know how to explain it. I could talk on and on about my graduate school experience, but it was the experience I got out of it was learning how to read research. That's what I learned from it. And I understood that. But in terms of nitty gritty of what I actually learned, I got a lot of experience with data collection with force plates and EMG and all that stuff and 3D motion capture, but it wasn't new equipment. So it's not irrelevant, but it's damn, I'm 30 years behind the most recent instrumentation. That's going to kill me if I ever get into a field where I need to learn this stuff fast. So it's weird. I understand the concepts better than I understand points of reference for knee joint torques and velocities and forces better than I actually understand how to run the software for it, which a lot of people, it's the reverse. They know how to run the software, but they don't know what the data means just looking at it on paper, and I do. So yeah, that's kind of weird, but hilarious that you're kind of doing something similar to what they were trying to do for your PhD, more or less. No?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at stuff from Jensen and Eben, I think that for me, and like what you went back to before with Mike Young, in saying that it is very kind of simplistic plyometrics for me. It's very, very basic in the form of, it's falling off of something, or it's 2 foot, very basic. Now, for me, I think there has to be a change of direction for plyometrics, and the essence of speed has to enter the realm now. And I don't think us as coaches have learned enough from things like triple jump, and us being able to really understand what's happening when we triple jump, because that, you think about the hop landing in triple jump, is probably the purest form of a plyometric movement that we have in anything that we do. I think it's going to be pretty hard for us to argue that there really isn't much more that's more athletic than that movement. So for me, I'd like to see a different direction in the way that we're going with plyometrics and how speed can influence plyometrics, because there is way too many clinical movements. I call them clinical because they're, standing on the spot. All right, great, jump off a box, and you maybe have to change the direction of the velocity in terms of you're going down and you have to change it to go up. But that's very unlikely to happen in sport regularly. It might happen once when you rebound a basketball and then go straight back up to put the ball back in. All right, great, but whether that's going to happen maximally, whether you're going to put intent into the ground that you want, or is it just going to be actually the outcome goal is for me to put the ball in the basket and not actually hit the ground how I'd like to. So plyometrics, within things like those studies, I think has a different direction for it to go, away from the clinical setting, to become way more field-based, aligned with the sports. When Isaiah does a dunk off 2 feet, there is no study ever done that's been able to record movement quite like that, in my opinion, personally. I haven't come across it. If you have, then please let me know, because I've got loads of reading to do around that sort of stuff if I've missed out on it.
There's one study that it's spike jump. So they say spike jump is the movement that they're looking at. I'm sure you've seen that study, but it's talking about volleyball. Volleyball is probably the closest bilateral approach, but not like, I don't know actually what their vertical displacements are, like what their actual vertical jump measures are. I've seen crazy metrics, like they touch well over 13 feet and stuff, and I'm really skeptical of that. I mean, I know they're really tall and they can jump, but like I'm just very skeptical of what I see. I think there's one guy that, Isaiah, do you know who I'm talking about? The volleyball player with like the crazy bounce that's very tall. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, like he's gone viral a couple times recently.
Is it Bromwell or something?
I don't remember his name. I know one guy, his name's like Kofi or something like that.
Okay.
He's Canadian guy. He's probably like 6'4", and I know he's touched like mid-12s or something like that.
That's insane.
Like that guy, he actually I think went to the same college as Jordan Kilgannon or something like that. Like there's a video of them like dunking together or something like that, or they wanted to dunk together.
Do you think it's legit? Do you think he actually does that make him have the highest vertical though? Like
vertical touch, maybe. I know it's definitely above 12. Like it's like
deep vertical though. Do you think he has the highest vertical though?
Not vertical. He's pretty tall.
Really? 6'4"? Yeah. I mean, that's not too.
He's like 6'4" and long arms. Like,
okay. All right, that makes more sense. So it's probably higher than AO Jamal.
8'3" or something like that.
Okay, that makes more sense. That's still wild. But anyways, that would probably be the best I would say to look at is like volleyball research. But I've only seen that one study with spike jump, and they do talk about the block foot and the plant foot and stuff like that. That's where I got a lot of the.
Another factor that bilateral like 2 foot jump in the dunk world that's never been like replicated before. I guess it's like. Is the fact that there's like a maximum speed going into the 2 foot jump. No other sport really has that. I would even argue basketball doesn't have that, because basketball, if you're on a fast break, it's usually guys jumping off of one leg when they dunk. There has been the rare instance where there's been a maximum speed 2 foot jump in a basketball game. I don't know if you guys know Gerald Green. He did a windmill. His entire head was above that was the maximum speed 2-foot jump in the NBA, but it's really rare, like in any sport.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, volleyball would be like, and that's even usually only 1 or 2 steps. Like, you don't, oftentimes won't really see, like, that's why their penultimate step tends to be a little shorter. They just don't have enough prerequisite speed coming into it, in my opinion. Also, there's long short method, but they tend to gravitate more towards that, in my opinion, because they need to be more dependent on anticipating how high the ball is. So they can't take the maximum amount of time to get into position like pro dunkers do a lot of the time. So that's kind of what I observed. But I'm sure we could talk about this in insane depth, and we kind of already have. But Matt, what questions did you have? You sent me some of them.
Yeah.
I haven't sent them to Isaiah, so.
No, that's good. That's good. And it actually, what we're talking about at the moment, it kind of falls perfectly into the first question. So I had a question I've just been looking at. I do watch quite a lot of dunking, and it just trolls through my Instagram constantly, and I'm like, oh, that's another one for me to kind of either send over to you, John, or study a little bit on somewhere like YouTube. But I've noticed that as you dunk, Isaiah, you have a pretty square-on body to the basket. Now, in terms of your feet and how you put your feet down, how does that compare to others? And do you think that there's advantages and disadvantages in having more of a side-on position in terms of how you enter your takeoff? Because like we had a conversation before where you spoke about you struggle to kind of handle your torso in the air previously, like you were over rotating tons. And for me, that it happens quite a lot in volleyball. These guys are really, really, really good at getting their body square onto the net. And they're able to control that over rotation really well. And I've noticed that's something that you're really good at doing. Your feet are they're almost square as if you have it in a squat, whereas other guys have much of a deeper stagger.
Yeah. I would say I'm definitely more square than your average dunker. Most guys, what makes it different for me is that I'm a right hand dunker. So normally what would be natural for a guy is to be right left and then right-handed. So they're gonna be dunking like this. For me, the way I plant is left right. What would be natural would be to dunk with my left hand, because that gives me a little bit, I can, like, your reach is higher if you're leaning this way than being like this. So I think I kind of developed that kind of square plant out of necessity of having to dunk right-handed so much.
Yeah.
And it's really different from other guys, because even guys that are right-handed and use a left-right plant, most of the time, if they're going for a one-handed dunk, they're gonna go up with their left hand. For example, Jay Clark and Jordan Kilgannon, they're the other like really elite left-right guys, and they're right-handed too. But when they go for a one-handed or a max touch, they're always going lefty. So honestly, it was just so much repetition of reaching with my right and then planting left-right that it kind of forced me to be square to the hoop. Another guy who's really good to look at is Lee Peck. Lee Peck is also a right-handed guy, and he also dunks like his one-handers with his right hand most of the time, and he's very, very square as well. So honestly, it was just that repetition of having to dunk with my right hand. One guy who's really interesting to look at, who's on the other side of the spectrum, is T-Dub. T-Dub, when he jumps, he's almost backwards to the basket. So he's right left, and there's literally times where kind of his torso is facing the hoop, but his legs are like basically facing backwards, because he just goes sideways so much, and the block is so aggressive that it just tends him, like he's literally just completely sideways, sometimes backwards on the jump. So that's the other spectrum, but that's why I'm like so square to the hoop.
Yeah, it makes sense. And because it was funny, I was watching again. I watched a kind of a dunk session that you put up on YouTube, and when the camera's behind you, I could swear that you're about to take off of 1 foot. I can convince sometimes I'm like, he's about to go off 1 foot. And then I'm guessing it's because of the control of your feet coming in as you go that 1-2 hit, that it kind of fools my eyes, and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, he's going off 2 feet.
Yeah.
So I actually think as well, like looking at a few of the dunks, that you're quite stiff when you're like that. When you're 2 feet are quite close together and you're doing a straight on dunk, you have real good stiffness and you don't actually absorb a lot on the eccentric loading of the takeoff. And I noticed that when you ever do like kind of a rotating dunk, if you're doing like a 180 or a 360, then you will swing your legs out to the side and you do absorb a hell of a lot more before you're able to extend off the ground. And I prefer the straight on dunk in terms of just how you're almost rigid off of it and you're able to pop.
Yeah.
And
what's funny is I've actually struggled a lot with getting my spin dunks to look more like my regular approach. Because obviously when it's just a straight on regular approach, that's when I get my most height. But I've struggled with that on going on a spin dunk. So that's been kind of like an enigma for me. Something I've been trying to solve for a while is how can I replicate my highest jumps when I'm trying to spin. So
the tough thing will always be, I guess, is if you're always going to want to try and get your feet into position so you have less turning to do in the air. So you're always going to struggle with the placement of your center of mass as you come in. So your center of mass is always going to be back for you when you want to go vertical, because you have to hit that pendulum so that you go straight up. If your center of mass is stiff like you go front on, then you're just going to topple over. So it's always slightly different. So I guess it's relearning that skill a little bit in terms of being able to get that concentric extension, the same one that you do from a straight on dunk. So I guess, again, it's another skill that you've got to learn. You can't just assume that you can come in and do a rotating dunk just off of big hops, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think like we observe this with CJ a lot too, but generally speaking, like the tougher, one of the hardest things, the people that are the best at spinning that dunk a lot, they do two things. They are fearless in how fast they run in. And the second thing is they are very good about turning their feet away from the rim prior to takeoff. So think about like a high jumper coming in. Basically imagine instead of a high jumper facing it towards the far corner or even towards the standard, they would face it towards the center of the curve. That's more or less what pro dunkers do. The center of their curve for their run up, that's where their feet are turning. And their block foot, what it'll also do, some people will pivot on that foot, but their block foot swings around further as well. So then when they plant, you'll actually see like Chris Staples is probably one of the best for spins, right? I mean, I would argue he's maybe the best at spinning. You agree with that? So like he basically plants his plant foot, and he's like CJ. So he's he's a right-hander. Is that right?
Yeah. He's that, but mirrored. So he's because CJ's left-handed, Chris Staples is right-handed.
Yeah. So basically, he plants his plant foot, which is the first step that comes down before the block foot. So the right foot on a right-left is towards the center of the foul line. Any spin dunk he does, that's how far he turns in, and you see the foot pronate over a lot. And then his block foot is basically foul line, like the center of the foul line extended, like it would be like whatever 2 or 3 feet extended from the center of the foul line. So he's basically rotated of the 360 degrees. His feet are already at 180. So like he doesn't have to spin very far prior to takeoff, but it looks like a full spin. So that's why like there's kind of this, like a 720 is really probably a 540. But people aren't gonna, and especially where you dunk relative to where you land, like that makes a huge difference too. You know what I mean? Because you might do a 720 in the air, or you might from toe off to touchdown. If you're looking at the hip axis versus the shoulder axis versus the feet, they're all rotating different amounts. So like, I think anytime someone sees that you're pushing off at the penultimate step, your position, that's generally where they assume the spin starts, but it doesn't. And then, it should be a toe off. And then where you dunk relative to where you land, people assume, well, he landed with 720 degrees. So that's a 720. And it's like, now you look at the cat, black cat, bad news. So I don't know. Isaiah, generally, what is like a 540, where do you toe off at? Where are your feet at when you leave the ground? And then do you land?
I was actually going to say my best jumps on spins, like when I get my best height, I think about if the hoop is right here, I'm approaching this way, I'm thinking about there being a hoop over there, and I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to try to jump as high as I can and dunk a hoop that's right behind me. So if I'm approaching, right, the hoop is in front of me, I'm jumping and I'm thinking I'm dunking at a hoop that's there. And then that kind of sets me up. That sets me up perfect. And then the rest is kind of like where I look. So when I turn my head, like my body just kind of starts naturally like rotating that way. And then how I pump on a straight up jump, I would normally pump the ball like this. On a spin, I would kind of do this kind of motion, like up and to the side, and that's what gives me my spin. But if I focus on a hoop behind me and just make sure I plant 180 degrees, like John said, like you're facing kind of the foul line, and then jump, and then the rest takes care of itself. The worst jumps are when I try to force, like I jump and I'm kind of facing the hoop, and then I kind of try to force the spin with my jump. Like I jump to the side, and that throws me off. So one of the jumps that's I think the hardest to do that on is a 540 or a 720. Because honestly, a 540 and a 720, it should only take as much height as you need, like on a one-hander. So if you can, theoretically, if you can do a 360 off the dribble, or even just a one-hander, if you can punch a one-hander, you should be able to 540, because it's just spinning, right? Like it's not needing extra height, you're just spinning fast. But what happens is a lot of people, myself included, like your body gets out of position. It messes up the plant because you're thinking about the spin. So you try to spin too early instead of letting the jump come through. A good example is like high jump. You know how they always tell you not to jump up first and then go like into the bar, not just like throw your head back. It's the same thing with a 540. You want to focus on the jump first, make sure you get that height, and then the spin comes in. But it's easier said than done. That's really difficult to do on a 540.
Yeah, I understand that completely. Trust me. Yeah, I know it's easier said than done. Everyone's like, yeah, high jump's easy. The flops is easier than learning than the straddle. And I'm like, dude, you can eat shit.
Yeah, and then as far as what the actual spin number is, a 540 is usually a 360, a 720 is usually a 540, a 360 is usually a 180.
A 180 is really just a 0-degree turn.
Yeah, because you're jumping with your back to the basket and then
just doing this.
But people would call that a 180. So
we need research. We need research on this. You know, we need to start get a PhD in the verbiage and dichotomy of these things, dunking, just like Matt.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. What was your next question, Matt? Because I knew you had a couple. I don't know how.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the big differences between dunkers. It kind of leads on from that question. Dunkers that spend more time on their lead leg in comparison to their block leg. Whether you see that it's advantageous to kind of really load up that first foot that comes down, so that they can kind of pop over the top of the second foot. Are there kind of both ends of the spectrum as I see in high jump? We've got our speed jumpers and our power jumpers. What are your opinions on that? Like, can you name a couple of guys that have super long or super short?
So what I've noticed is that guys who are more of a power jumper that rely more on strength, they'll load up the block foot a lot more. And you usually see that by whether or not their block foot or their knee is bent on the block foot. So guys, and then compare that to guys who rely a lot on speed. What you usually see on those guys is their plant leg is really bent, they're really low, and then their block leg is they have a huge straddle, and then it comes around, it's turned a lot, and it's usually pretty straight, like the knee's pretty straight. Guys who are on the speed side of things, I would say is as far as how they load their block leg, is Jordan Kilgannon. He doesn't have a lot of bend. T-Dub is another guy that's like that. And then on the other side of things, I load my block leg a lot. My jump almost looks like it's almost like even, like it's like as even as you could, like between both legs. Jay Clark, he's another guy that's like that. Jay Clark is arguably he is the strongest dunker out of anybody. He doesn't have a lot of speed on his approach. And so yeah, those are kind of like two sides of the spectrum as far as that. And as far as jump height, honestly, like I've seen it pretty evenly split. Like I haven't seen that there's one that's more advantageous than the other.
Yeah. Have you tried, like, have you played around with changing things up yourself, or have you just kind of let it happen naturally? Because I think that's a big thing for guys that are coming up in trying to learn how to dunk and jump higher and stuff. You know, do I continue to follow the people that I aspire to be like, or do I allow my my jumping to just become a lot more natural and something that
I've
be my own?
I've had a lot of like back and forth with that same question, as far as technique goes, because I started getting knee problems on my right leg, and it was at the angle. It was like at a quarter squat angle, right? And it was the same angle that's hit by my block leg on my jump. So I remember I actually mentioned this to John. I was thinking about playing around with trying to get less of an angle on the block leg, and I tried it for a few sessions, to be honest. And the biggest thing that helped it was adding more speed into my approach. So when I added more speed, just naturally my block foot wouldn't bend as much. As far as seeing differences, honestly, I don't think I did it for long enough to see if I could like adapt to it, start jumping higher. Um, I would say I probably jumped an inch or two less than with my like regular jump strategy. Now, having said that, do I think a guy should go with what's natural or with what they think would be more ideal? I think honestly, I'm more towards the natural side. Just because I found that the more I focus on just letting my jump technique take care of itself, and then just get the reps in, and then do my weight room work and all that, I just jump higher. But that could just be that like I'm already so far into it that like changing my technique up would just be detrimental. So it could be different for someone that's a beginner just starting out.
Sure.
I think something that I will oftentimes say about that question specifically is, well, your dominant plant, you've probably jumped that way for like whatever plus years, and you're already elite at it. So if you want to change your technique, do it on your non-dominant plant, because you can always play around with that, and it's not a high risk option. So like that's why I learned speed jumping on my right, because I don't want to lose my power jumping on my left, like learning how to speed jump on that leg, because I do end up losing a little bit of motor learning when I try to learn something that's very close to, like, it's too similar. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like the reason why you don't do a lot of speed endurance as a sprinter, because speed endurance is too slow, like, or not special endurance, sorry. Special endurance is too slow, that it's just in that in between where if you're trying to run 0.01 faster in the 100, you running at 97% is not going to help you run that 0.01 faster. It's too similar, you know? So like they're things, but they're so similar. And so like if you do it the other leg, the other plant, you know, it's like when people ask me should I switch to speed jumping? And I'm like, if it doesn't happen naturally and you want to learn it and you power jumped off your, you know, left leg your whole life, learn it on the other leg. Like just start there, because you don't have a pre-learned motor pattern that you have to switch. I can speed jump and power jump off either leg. Like I know what cues to think about to get that. Yeah. But if it's autonomous, if there's that pre-anticipation to get the pop off the ground, that's very different. Like that happens from hundreds to thousands to, I would argue, hundreds of thousands of reps, like Isaiah and Jordan.
Another thing is I almost feel like all technique is natural in the sense that technique is a result of everything that happened before that specific thing that you're observing. So when it comes, this example that I just gave, when I tried to change my technique up for like a month or so, I started having more of a straight block foot when I literally just added more speed into my approach. And a really good example of that, like, is Nick Briz. He's a speed jumper, right? He's a perfect example of a speed jumper that's a dunker. But when he tried teaching how he jumps off one foot, he said to use as much knee drive as you can, and then he only took one step and then jumped, and it was power jump technique. But you put him down the basketball court full runway, he's gonna start speed jumping, and that's really similar to practicing speed jumping off one leg. You could easily speed jump like off of one step, like the mechanics of it and stuff like that. But that's more because you're trying to speed jump. It's not because you're going fast, right? Whereas if you add speed into it, it'll happen more naturally. Obviously, some guys will tend to power jump, other guys will speed jump, but like it'll happen a lot easier if you have speed going into a speed jump. So I think
that downhill run for me that I was doing the other day, like it was so much easier. Like I could go like 70% on the run up, 50% on the run up, and have a way higher takeoff velocity because I'm going down the hill, and like I could do it every single time, like pretty easily, like without really trying. Now, did it wreck my like takeoff leg hip because of the eccentric forces? Hell yeah. Do I regret that? Maybe. Will I do it again? Yes. But that said, I think the speed jumping thing is a good analogy to that. And I think, Matt, you've probably heard that as well in triple jump and in high jump. Well, if your second phase sucks in triple jump, it's your first phase. Your first phase sucks, it's your run up. If you're, you know what I mean? You hear that all the time. And it is true. Like everything that is preceding a movement is a cause, it will cause the, you know, the result of whatever you're looking at to change. Like just, you know, from a penultimate step point of view or bilateral jumping, your block foot is going to suck probably if you do a long short. It's not going to be a traditional block foot. You're not going to have a wide stance. The foot's not. You're not going to get a whip and flail action. It's basically a completely different jump, in my opinion. I mean, you just won't see those mechanics happen like you do. Like it would be the difference between like a glide and a spin in shot. Like they just, you know what I mean. You don't see the same block foot. You don't see the same rotation.
Yeah, like you know when guys when they plant their block foot on with the heel instead of having it come around and be toe. Those guys are usually the long short guys. So they didn't really push off, like John said, they didn't get that whip action. And because they didn't get that whip action, now it's more like they're actively putting their block foot down instead of letting the block foot be like a reaction to the penultimate step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the reason that happens is because, and Matt, this is, again, we're maybe a little off track, but maybe you're interested in this. I don't know.
No, I'm good. It's good.
So I think the reason that it happens, like a whip and flail action is a biomechanics term. That is literally what happens in baseball. That's what happens in shot put. It happens in javelin. It happens a lot in where you see a hard block and you see the whip action of a distal limb, right? I mean, we see that all the time. So that happens in bilateral jump technique. When you plant there's two reasons why it happens better. If you're able to coordinate the movement and stay very relaxed, when you kick out the plant foot, and you lower prior to the penultimate step, and you leave the penultimate step back behind you, if you have a rotating pelvis, or if you kick the plant foot out, your pelvis is allowed to rotate on the block foot side. So and the other thing that really helps is if you plant across the body. So the same way that I think this happens in high jump too, right? If you plant across the body on the outside of the heel, then your free leg that pelvis will probably naturally whip around. And that's how a lot of people get a good twisting action. Unless you're me, and then it just doesn't happen naturally, and then you have to think about it. But in dunking, a lot of the time, if you have a very stiff plant foot, like you would in baseball on the stride out when you land, if that leg is very stiff and the thigh angle is closer to parallel, you're going to have more horizontal forces. You're going to have more braking forces. That means you can bring more speed into the jump, and that means it's going to be easier if you stay relaxed for the block side pelvis to whip around and allow you to use the elastic components and large, long impulses and a very elastic response when it does touch the ground. If you don't do that, if you have a very short plant or a very short penultimate stride, it turns into this squatty potty jump. And it looks, I mean, I'm going to call it the squatty potty jump because I think it looks like trash. Some people jump better that way. I don't like it. There's few people I think that can make it look decent, but they're less on that long short continuum. Like it's a continuum, you know what I mean? It's not black and white. And the same thing goes for speed jumping. You might speed jump through the knee versus butt kicking. I mean, I
think that's another reason why, Matt, you were mentioning how my stance is like pretty close together, and then just like square. I think because of me having such a stiff plant leg. Like John said, it's a lot of braking forces. So I don't need to have as big of like a split with my block foot to prevent me from going forward as much, right? I've already like absorbed so much with that plant leg that the other ones I'm just focused on putting that foot down and just like popping straight up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good. There's so many similar things that come together, like you say, in sport, like that. Just the analogy of you using that leg coming round, John. Like you say, it happens in jab, it happens in baseball, it happens in all of the throws. Mm-hmm. It happens pretty much you're going to get that same stretch reflex that you get in all of the jumps. And it falls exactly like that in dunking, which is super interesting for me in learning more about it. So
yeah.
my next question was looking at what part of your landing and takeoff mechanic do you think that you feel sensationally might affect the quality of your jump sometimes. So do you think there's anything that's dysfunctional? Do you think that, are you always trying to stop yourself doing something? Like I could go back 5, 6, 7 years to my high jump, and I can tell you exactly the same cue that I still couldn't get to this day, which I know would have fed into my jump performance a lot better. Is there anything that do you think that you can either remedy, or actually I'm just going to move past it and just keep going with it? John, you can obviously give your feedback after Isaiah's maybe led down his opinion on it, but I'm intrigued to see what you say.
So I will say that when I'm having a good jumping day, I am not thinking about anything. I don't have to think about anything. I feel like the times where I would have to focus on maybe a certain cue would be like when I feel really sluggish and just flat when I'm jumping.
I guess the big one would be, okay, say you were doing a testing day to see how high you jump. Like, why aren't you jumping 55? Tell me.
Yeah. So one cue that actually always used to help me a lot, I haven't used it as much recently, but it's the cue jump hard. I remember back in the day, like when I was in high school, and I would be testing a lot more frequently. Now when I have dunk sessions, it's more focused around the dunks I can hit and not so much like how high I'm jumping. But back then it's like, oh, I'm getting right here on the rim. Now I'm getting here, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember the cue just jump hard would help a lot. But then I started running into the issue that I was too like stressed in my approach to like I was trying too hard on my approach. So then I actually talked with Jordan Kilganning about this, and he explained that his jump, it was more relax, and then just like violence at the very end. So now my cue is more like I try to get good speed on my approach. Usually if I'm having a bad jumping day, on days where I'm feeling bad, it's super slow. So I'm thinking run fast, but run relaxed, and then jump hard. I feel like those are my main things. Because if I'm trying too hard, that kind of just throws off the whole jump. So it's just like relax, and then the push is where I'm thinking jump hard. Like when both feet are planted, and I'm just thinking like that moment where everything is just has to go up. That's where I'm thinking like just aggressive jump hard.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Like if you were saying before, when you were trying to jump hard, like your initial thing was, I'm just going to jump as hard as I can. It's probably because you were trying to jump hard before you'd hit the ground. So you were missing that synchronization. So now that, like, changing that cue slightly and having that more relaxed state into being like, okay, as soon as I feel my feet are planted, then it's time to go. You've probably already done the jump. It's about you just getting maximum kind of extension off of that, which is probably why being super relaxed is important for you.
Yeah, and then I'm just thinking about this now because it's just coming to me as I think more about how the sensations feel. There is one thing I always focus on, and that's my penultimate. Getting that push off my right leg, like getting that full kind of extension. I think maybe 80%, especially when I'm in a contest. When I'm in a contest, a lot of times there can be so many people and like so many things going on that it kind of like fucks up your approach in a way. Like if you're not focused.
For lack of a term.
Honestly, my penultimate push is kind of what ties in my whole approach, because I know I can be running, but that time when my right leg hits the ground, from that time till when I take off, everything is that's kind of what sets up the jump perfectly. Like I can stutter step my approach, I can freaking trip, slow down, speed up, but when I know as soon as my plant leg hits, everything is an acceleration from there, and it sets up the jump. So I'm always thinking just push off that penultimate. It's kind of like, because I think because I drilled it so much as a kid, because I used to have a problem. I used to be a long short guy, so I had a problem with really getting that full extension. Like it became such a thing. Literally every jump I used to take, I would think, all right, push, like long penultimate. And I think I just repeated that cue so many times that I still use that cue like subconsciously. It's kind of my comfort place in my approach. Like that's the one piece of my approach where it's like, all right, when I hit this, it's boom. If I get a good stride, like it's gonna set it up. So
it's on.
yeah.
It's it makes me think as well. Like my mind is going off in so many different directions that actually how incredibly precise jumpers are, whether you're a dunker, whether you're a high jumper, even if whatever direction you're at, however much space that you have, that you're able to figure out and organize your body in a way that's still able to put your feet down at the exact precise point for you to know spatially. It is incredible what we can do.
A perfect example of that is when there's dunk competitions in a court with like no lines, or I mean, I grew up jumping on the street. Like I had my basketball hoop on my driveway or on my street, and like there was no lines. And you could put me now, like I've had a few sessions on like regular basketball court for a couple of months now. You could put me on a hoop on a street, and I'm gonna know where to approach from and like where to jump. It's almost like, imagine if like high jump competitions, like if you didn't count your steps, like that. And I think even high jumpers probably have a good general idea of where to jump from.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you were to secretly walk onto a high jump fan and all the high jumpers have got their markers out, if you changed all of them, they would find their tape and they would still jump. I honestly believe that you could probably do that, and not many guys would actually be like, oh, I'm actually thrown totally off. They'd probably be all right. They would organize their bodies.
Dude, what's crazy is like, as a high jump coach, I've done this before where people are doing their approaches and stuff, and I'm like, damn, nothing's working. I will literally walk up to the point where I'm like, yeah, if I took the slightly smaller strides, about this would feel natural. Like, there was this girl, there's an anecdote. She's a high jumper at Duke. She really struggled with finding an approach. She was reachy, and she was then too short. She was adding steps and stuttering. And I was like, stand here. I was like, stand right here. Take 3 steps and jump over the bar. She's like, right here? I was like, right there, stand right there. And like, I just like walked over to it. I didn't measure the width, didn't measure the length. I just stood there and I said, do your approach. Took 3 steps, boom, perfect. I said, okay, now I'm going to add steps. Took 2 steps back. I was like, oh, that's slightly too far. Move forward 6 inches, move that a little bit. I was like, all right, stand right here. And I can just naturally like figure out exactly where that point is. And like, sometimes like a lot of the time, honestly, I will not measure. Like for a long time on my left leg, I would not have to measure really my approach. I could just like, I'd have a ballpark on where I wanted it. Like on my home apron, I didn't have to at all. I just knew where to stand. But like on other places I would go, like I would know inherently, I didn't need a half mark. I didn't need anything. I would just like, and if it were off, I'd be like, oh, I need to move up. I just inherently knew, or subconsciously knew, like, this is where I need to stand to do that. And I think the same thing happens with dunking. I'm like, oh, I need to be about this angle. I need to be about this position. And like I think it does happen from like pure reps. And what he was talking about is really interesting because like as a speed jumper, as I've gotten better on my right leg, and even when I was on my left leg, I always think there's one cue that I really use when I'm doing like run jumps and stuff, like to make sure I speed jump is, all right, make sure you flick the ground up with your toe, heel to low back. For me, every single time if I do that, it's going to work. Like I'm going to speed jump. There's no question about it. Yeah, I'm going to hit the positions I need to get into. For a long time when I was learning that, I could not do it. Like a lot of people don't know this, but I was trying to learn to speed jump for years prior to that, until when I finally figured out what it was, I was like watching Tora Harris and I could not repeat it. I could not do it. I was repping it out over. I looked like such an idiot. I was trying to change the length of my stride. I was trying to change the length of how far my foot was in front of me. I just couldn't learn it. And then finally I was like, oh, it's the penultimate step. Like I just figured it out. Like Jordan Kilgannon said this in an interview with Whistle. No one taught him how to do all the dunks he had to do. He had to figure it out. And like, that's the same way it is for me, like with speed jumping. I had to figure out how to get what I wanted to happen and then also add in the performance side of things. And like, when people ask me how to speed jump, I'm like, literally, I cannot teach you unless I'm in person. Like it's way too difficult for me to change all those mechanics unless I'm standing there next to you. And then it's like, then you add the level of complexity with what like you're having me do, Matt. And now I have like 4 things in my head. And I'm like, I need to, like on those 3-step drills, it's like, I need to run fast enough so that I can get my heel to my butt sufficiently. And I'm trying to externally rotate my foot while I'm trying to like get a full extension. And I think motor learning in general just takes time until things become autonomous, you know, like you can really only handle 1 or 2 things. I mean, I would say I'm a little bit different in that I can do all 4 things you ask me to do. I can actually do all 4 of them at one time, but it's not synchronous. Like that's probably what you noticed, right, Matt? Like it's like, yeah, you did all the things I asked, but you lost the rhythm. You lost the synchronization of it. It doesn't look smooth. You don't pop off the ground doing it. It's like, no, but if I repeat this 1,000 times, I'll probably get it. So yeah, that's generally, I think you talked to Jordan Kilgannon too, is what else I would have to say. When he was testing and he was trying to touch 11:10, 11:12, or 11:11, 11:12, that's 12 feet. when he was trying to touch that, he was basically saying like, he was like, I asked him after, I said, what are you thinking about? What's going through your head? What does it feel like? And he's like, I literally just look up and I try to stay back. It feels like I'm jumping off my penultimate step. And I think that's what the same sensation Isaiah is kind of describing with him. Like when he really pushes through that penultimate step, and like people generally, when they try to stay back or they're looking up, like that's what he said. He's like, he's like, what's probably happening is I'm pushing harder off the penultimate step and I'm leaning back more instead of blowing through the jump. He said, what it feels like, I look up at the thing I'm trying to touch and it feels like I'm jumping into the jump. He said, that's what it feels like. But generally speaking, that
sensation, the jump's actually the perfect way to describe it. When I take penultimate, it's literally 2 jumps. I jump off my penultimate step and then I jump into the jump. Like
there's 2 ways to do that. This is what I've learned though, is that cue jump into the jump. There's like, if you do that, like as a power jumper, that will not give me the cue that I want, because that sensation, what you associate jumping with off your penultimate step or jumping off the jump or jumping off that step or jumping into the jump, that's a very different cue when you're at a different velocity. And it's a very different cue. So when you're learning and you're at a slow velocity, because you have to be, that you associate 2 very different things together. Like you probably associate jumping off the jump with like, oh, I have hyperextension in my hip, hyperextension in my knee, and you're pushing so hard you naturally hit those positions. But if you suck and you're a long short, jumping into the jump feels like long short. That's what it feels like. You're like, I'm doing that. That's what I'm doing. I'm literally doing it. And they are. They've associated that motor pattern with jumping. That is their motor pattern for jumping. Like that's what they know it to be. And so it's like you have to figure out what cues are going to get someone to reteach that when they don't do that. So like that's really for me the thing where you have people with really bad technique. Dan Pass said this. You have to find 100 ways to communicate the same thing, and every single one of those ways has a shelf life. You know, every motor learning cue has a shelf life. It might last a month, it might last a year, it might last 10 years. Like for Isaiah, it's 10 years that cue's worked for him. For me, you know, the cue of I've tried freaking hundreds of cues for speed jumping. For me right now, it's leave the foot behind the body, kick up the rocks, or flick your foot backwards, or flick through your toes, whatever you want to say. Like there's 3 different ones for the same thing for me in my mind. And heel to low back. You know, those are for me what I need to do. And I'm sure it's going to change over time as I get more coordinated and I get better. So yeah, that's generally my opinion on it. I did have a lot of things to say about that because I was thinking about a lot of stuff and what Jordan said and Jonathan and Isaiah and CJ, because I like that question. What do you think about? That's a good question. I love to ask people, the highest jumpers in the world. What's going through your head? Most speed jumpers will say nothing. I just run. And I'm like, well, fuck you.
Yeah. Biggest high jumpers in the world. Oh, just run and jump. No way. I'm not having it.
It's like
we want to know. We want to know.
You know, it would be a better question to ask like in the middle of the jump session. I feel like if you're there asking me like after each jump, like I could give a better answer. We should do a podcast mid dunk session one day.
I think, and that is true. Like you definitely give me better feedback. What's funny though is that like that doesn't make the dunk session enjoyable when you're answering what you're thinking about between every rep. Like,
yeah.
Like
it's good to have times where you have conscious sessions though that I see. I see totally unconscious sessions where you just go, right, just run and jump or just run and dunk. That's it. Nothing. No more. You and the ball, do what you like. But there has to be conscious sessions as well.
Probably would be better on a day where you're trying to do vertec or something like that or see how high you can touch. Then it would be easier, because in the middle of a dunk session, I'm just trying to hit this dunk. Like, that's not bad.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. It's weird when you talk to the elite guys though, because I found this to be true. They happen upon it. They like elite jumpers just happen upon their technique. They don't think about anything. It's just repping it out and what comes naturally to them. And like that's disheartening for someone that didn't happen for, like myself. Like my power jumping, honestly, that did happen. Like my power jumping, I would argue my power jumping technique is like on dunks is better than most even elite dunkers. If you look at the positions I hit, the angles I hit, stuff like that, like just purely from a jump technique wise, not dunk technique. I think good jump technique actually conflicts with good dunk technique, actually. Like, because you often see, you look at Jordan Sutherland, you look at, he's really the only elite 1 foot guy right now. I mean, Nick Briz is like maybe another example, but he can't do any trick dunks and he has really good positions when he jumps and he jumps really high. So it's like, Zeus is another one, Isaiah Edwards. I can't even think, Austin Eli. You look at these elite 1 foot dunkers, like they can do between the legs. They can do 360 windmills, 360 scoops. Nick Ross is another one. There's only specific jumps from specific angles where they have very good jump technique. Like the majority of their jumps are like bad jump technique from the perspective of just purely jump height. You know, you want to see someone test their vertical. What positions do they hit? I think generally speaking on my dunks, I can hit those positions easier, but it's not like I have to do it from a certain angle. Usually it'll take me, I know what to do to get into those positions. Like I do some up and under layups and I know I'm going to hit perfect positions every single time. Like every single time, doesn't matter. Power jumping. And then I go into the dunk session and boom, I'm flying. Like I'll jump higher in that and high jump. I don't do that though. Like weirdly, I don't do that in high jump, which has always been interesting to me. So
it's really interesting too, John. Like I've told you before and you've seen the videos, like I used to be a long short guy. I actually came across a video of me when I was 15. It was my first dunk on 9.6 and beautiful penultimate stride. Like I hit like perfect extension, took a long ass penultimate step and hit the dunk. And then a year later, you look at me trying to dunk on 10 feet and long, short, ugly, super ugly technique. So I think it varies a lot, like on so many different factors, like what dunk you're trying to hit, your distance from the hoop. There's this guy we train, Travis Reynolds. We noticed the reason he's a long, short guy. The reason he's not taking a big split is because he's starting at the 3-point line and then taking a 5-step approach. He literally doesn't have room to do a full penultimate shot, but he's been dunking, taking 5 steps from the 3-point line for years now. That is normal for him. And then we saw a video of him when he actually had a good split. He started with a farther approach. To give you an idea, a 5-step approach, that's how many steps I take. I'm probably starting like 6 feet behind the 3-point line. And that's usually where guys take 5 steps from. And then he's starting like a little bit in front of the 3-point line. So he literally has like 7 or 8 feet less to work with.
He's 6'2".
Yeah. So there's so many factors that go into it, and like you can happen upon good technique. I feel like if the environment like lets it, like because for another thing where it's environment, the hoop that I had in front of my house, it had a pole, so like right in front of the hoop. So I couldn't. It literally, if I covered the distance that guys usually cover on those jumps, I would get injured. I would run into the pole. So that made me stay back on my penultimate. So I'm not as like lean forward as most guys. The block foot, my jump literally had to be, I would hit the ground and it would have to be perfectly straight up and straight down. So that probably manipulated my technique in some kind of way. And then other guys have a driveway where maybe it's slanted or like stuff like that.
I was going to say that. I think that plays a lot. Like you want to talk about speed jumpers. I think the reason speed jumpers exist in basketball, because it doesn't usually happen, is three reasons. They're predisposed with very stiff tendons, that it's a favorable jump strategy. Stiff tendons favor speed jumping. I think that's one reason why. Second reason why, they ran super fast because of their stiff tendons, or they didn't know how to play basketball or how to be smooth or rhythmic, so they just sprinted at the freaking rim. Third reason, they could palm the ball at their shoulder and curl and press it. That's the third reason why. I think those 3 reasons, if you're a little kid and you're learning how to do a layup, if you have those 3 things line up, odds are you'll probably happen upon speed jumping. Every speed jumper I've talked to, I said, well, what did you do when you were a kid? Like, I really haven't talked to Nick Briz too much, but he aligns with these other 4 people that I've talked to. Jordan Westner, Pat Dicker, whatever. I ran really fast. They both have very stiff tendons. Okay, what's the third thing? They both curl and press the ball. They'd be like, yeah, I just would palm the ball or whatever when I was trying to dunk, and every time I did it, it was just more natural for me to do that. And it's like, well, there you go. You're gonna happen upon it if you do that. And then I think fourth, with having very flexible hip flexors, that's another one that makes a big difference.
Yeah, because obviously to speed jump, you have to sprint into the jump. And when you think about sprinting, sprint technique, there is that cyclic heel to butt action. And it's just natural. If you're already sprinting, just run off the ground and you're gonna speed jump. But I think a lot of guys in basketball and stuff, they're not going top speed. They might be thinking they're going fast, but they're not actually sprinting. It's more of like a fast jog. I would say most 1-foot jumpers, power jumpers, it's like a fast jog into.
Yeah, it's like a 4 or 800 miler run or 800 to miler run. It's not super fast. Honestly, they think it's fast, but it's really not.
Yeah, because thinking about me because that's a tip I used to get for 1-foot jumping is run faster. And I just remember always thinking like, I can't run faster on this jump. Like I really can't. And it's because I was power jumping.
Yeah.
Whereas if I would have changed it into like a speed jump, then maybe I would have been able to really sprint into it.
I can add basically infinite speed to my speed jump, but the problem is I pull my hamstring or my hip flexor or tear my labrum because the forces are insane. Like, that's why I try to keep it so slow. But Matt, yeah, sorry, we went really on a tangent there. Hopefully it was interesting to you. You have other questions?
Cool. Yeah, just the last couple of bits. I kind of sat there and thought like, what's next for dunking? Like for me, high jump is about finding what has already been. You know, I don't think the high jump community is at a stage as it was in the 90s. You know, when we had a lot of guys, you know, like to win a world medal, you have to jump 37 and above, like 237 and above. Like what's next for dunking? Like what's going to be the next big step? You know, and I've put a few notes down in terms of like, is there a step for people now to be doing things like overheight dunking on like an 11-foot rim, or is there what's next?
I mean, Jay Clark is already doing that. Jonathan Clark is already practicing dunking on a 10.6, 10.4 rim over speed, whatever. My opinion, in terms of training, or in terms of moving the sport forward, I think it'll be doing more technically difficult dunks more frequently in contests and being able to do that consistently. I think that's going to be a big thing. I think maybe the next step would be, hey, move the rim to 10.6. Let me do those technical dunks on 10.6. From a vertical point of view, I know,
like example, like between the legs, like choose the between the legs, and it's like, all right, the competition today is who can do it between the legs on the highest rim or the highest reach to rim like difference, like stuff like that.
Yeah, that could happen.
Idea.
I think that would be it. Isaiah, what's your opinion on
that? Honestly, that's an amazing idea. It would make the sport more objective, more easily measured objectively. And honestly, there's a demand for that kind of content too. Dunk League, first dunk competition of its kind that ever existed. Every episode, million views, and they were doing stuff like how high challenge, how high of a hoop can you dunk? All right, this challenge, you have to do a windmill between the legs, a 360. Who can do it in the fastest amount of time? I think those kind of like challenges and competitions would allow it to be more of a legitimate sport. And then I think obviously the upper echelon that it could reach is the Olympics. I think it's really close to being an Olympic sport. I actually talked to some of the guys at FIBA 3x3 that run that. This was after my competition in Japan. And if you guys don't know, FIBA 3x3, that's going to be in the next Olympics. It's going to be an actual sport there. And they actually had a bid. They had a bid for FIBA 3x3 and for dunking to be a sport. So they tried to, because dunking is always an extension of the FIBA 3x3 events. And yeah, they put a bid in for it to become a sport. And the main thing stopping them from making it a sport was actually in the Olympics was actually that there's no like females doing it. So for sports to be in the Olympics, there kind of has to be like a man and women's like division and stuff like that. So that was actually the main thing like that prevented it from becoming a sport. So with that, I think you could easily involve women, just different rim heights. Like that's
actually a big goal for for us as well, like for our business and trying to move the sport forward. Like we're basically volunteering away 2 to 3 spots for women right now to try to have them improve and be able to dunk on 8, 6, 9 foot rims or whatever. Maybe some of them 10, but like we talked about this the other day with TT's little sister. We're like, we want to try to get this, more involved for women, because I think it is this thing that is dominated by men, but that doesn't mean there aren't women that are interested in doing it. I mean, there was like a 14-year-old girl that dunked for the first time on a 10-foot rim base. Or she was 15 or 14. She was a 1-foot jumper, dunked on a 10-foot rim, super ugly approach, very, very long, but she did it. And so I think if you were to standardize it a little better, maybe we lower the rim height down to 9 foot for most of women or whatever, like maybe using high jump as a standard to compare the world record for women, world record for men, it's probably possible at that point. Generally speaking, female basketball players are a little bit shorter as a whole. And I think the reason they don't jump as high is just because they don't care about jumping as much. They don't think they can dunk, and therefore it's not cool to dunk because you'll never be able to do it, because in their minds they've created that assumption. But we see women all the time in high jump way higher than high school men, than collegiate. You see that all the time.
I feel like the main thing that kind of gets guys into dunking, like pro dunkers, is low rimming. They had access to some kind of low rim growing up, and they got obsessed with it. They tried all these crazy dunks, and then when they matured enough to the point where they could dunk on 10 feet, they could apply those same dunks to actual 10-foot basketball goal. So I feel like women just usually don't have that, or they don't go through that. They don't go through going to a low rim and trying to dunk it and stuff like that. Because there's nothing about it that's like about the male brain that makes dunking more addicting. Like it's literally the same thing. It's just jumping and you're dunking. So I feel like if you were to expose like a girl that's like 11, 12 years old, get her on a 7-foot rim and have her dunk, she's gonna have fun with it. She's gonna see, like, it's gonna bring her joy and stuff like that. And then the progress. That's one of the biggest things with dunking and jump training is the progress. Like when you first see that little bit of improvement, it's like, whoa, like this is working. Like what I'm doing is improving how high I can jump, and then that makes you want to keep doing it. So I think it's just exposing women to jump training and the progress of jumping and something that's fun like that.
Yeah, I think you see it in women's high jump all the time too. If you talk to elite women high jumpers, they're equally as obsessed as men with it. Maybe sometimes more obsessed with some of my friends at that level. And like, it's just, I don't know, it's just the nature of jumping and achieving goals, and the way that jumping, or specifically high jump, is set up. It's just, you clear the bar, you go up higher. It's a crowd pleaser sport.
My girlfriend, John, was there the first dunk camp. My girlfriend did the 8-foot dunk contest.
Awesome.
She said like that was one of the most fun things she ever did. Like it was literally at dunk camp. She was with me. I think Andy asked her if she wanted to do the dunk contest or something like that, and she said yeah. And like she was there like doing like double elbows and stuff like that. Like
I mean, the thing is like it's not even. I mean, literally all you have to do is like have a hoop that goes up and down. Have a professional measure their reach. That's it. That's all you need to do. Have a professional measure their reach, someone that knows what they're doing, and it's not hard. Like, I mean, that's more objective than gymnastics is in some senses. Like, or diving or anything else. Like, there's a point system. It's based on what you see, and then you score it accordingly. Like, I mean, yeah, maybe you're an inch or two off, but if you have a professional there, whatever, an inch or two, okay, maybe you have every year they go through that process, like getting their height and weight or whatever, and then you have those rims preset. You know what the rims have to go up and down to. You have someone measure the rims, you make it pretty quick. Like, they do all their dunks on that, whoever it is. I mean, you could standardize the entire competition right there. Boom. Women can do it. Men can do it. We have a set height. It's 24 inches for men. Or the rim height's going to be preset at 20. It's 28 inches for men. The rim from the edge of your finger to the rim, or whatever it is, 8 feet, probably 24 to 26, somewhere in that ballpark. And then you say for women, it's 20 inches to the rim or whatever. And it's like, there you go. You just standardize the entire thing. It wasn't even hard. Like, I think generally speaking, it's very feasible to do. It's just a matter of, can we create a norm where that's accepted, or is there anyone that's willing to invest a shit ton of money, maybe like FIBA did, or Spike Ball, or
I would actually love to see a competition like that where it's rim adjusted to your reach. Like, so you get, because there's so many guys that have like a 7'6" reach, they're like 5'9", and they have bounce, but the reach limits them. And then you see those guys on like a 9'6" rim, and they're freaky. They're doing some like cool stuff. And then there's the other side of the spectrum where you got guys that have like an 8'6" reach, and like it's nothing. Like a 10-foot rim is literally nothing for them. So I think that would be really dope, and it would help standardize everything. Maybe
it's not like basketball where everyone's on the same court. You don't have 5 people on a court, Like, I mean, honestly, you could do it in high jump too. You could just take 57% of your standing height, and you could do the differentials like that and see who wins. Like, the thing is, the nature of it is that a lot of people don't want to do that. By the way, we got to cut this, but we'll say this is the last note, Matt. You can say whatever, but people don't want to do that. Weightlifting uses weight classes. Like, why can't we do that? It's not that insane to do, but I mean, for individual sports, it's really not. But we feel the need to. So I don't know. It's less fair. I mean, it is. It's less fair. Anyways, Matt, anything else you wanted to say?
No, that was it. I appreciate your kind of honesty, Isaiah. It's great to get more insights like that out of you. I don't know if that's kind of changed a few or brought a few different questions into the podcast that's kind of been rolling over the last couple of weeks. I hope it has. I've really enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah, no, it was fun for us to do that. So, all right, I think we'll sign off with that. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll have this up on iTunes and Spotify. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, let us know, share it on your story. We will basically always, if we see it, share it on our story. So if you're just trying to leech off us for followers on Instagram, feel free to do it. We don't care. Let us know if you listen to it. This will also be up on YouTube. We'll put the link in the description. Thanks for listening, guys. Peace out.
Bye.